Hey all. It is Thursday, so I thought I might do a Poetry Thursday. You know, the P is silent. Um, and I thought today I would start with Anne Sexton because she's one of my favorites. Not that I want to play favorites, but she also has a bunch of poems that are very. She's known for being in the Confessional school of poetry. So she did a series of these like confessional style poems, but they were kind of themed after fairy tales. And since we've been doing stories and stuff for a little while, I thought that that might be a good way to, ease you into the Poetry Thursday, the P is silent of it all. I don't know. So we're going to read Red Riding Hood, Snow White, and then Cinderella. I think I got that order right. And then at the end, we're going to read Ringing the Bells, which is one of her more most famous poems. So I'm gonna do all of the timestamps in the video description box. So if you just are here for like ringing the bells um, for a school project or something, I'm not gonna hold that against you. Um, so here we go. Anne Sexton poems. I have one of them on my e-reader, and then the rest of them are in a book. So, Red Riding Hood. Many are the deceivers. The suburban matron, proper in the supermarket, list in hand so she won't suddenly fly, buying her dues and chuck wagon dog food, meanwhile ascending from earth, letting her stomach fill up with helium, letting her arms go loose as kite tails, getting ready to meet her lover a mile down at Applecrest Road in the Congregational Church parking lot. Two seemingly respectable women come up to old Jenny and show her an envelope full of money and promise to share the booty if she'll give him 10,000 act of faith. Her life savings are under the mattress, covered with rust stains and counting. They are as wrinkled as prunes, but negotiable. The two women take the money and disappear. Where's the moral? Not all knives are for stabbing the exposed belly. Rock climbs on rock, and it only makes a seashore. Old Jenny has lost her belief in mattresses, and now she has no basket in which to keep her youth. The stand-up comic on The Tonight Show, who imitates the vice president and cracks up Johnny Carson and delays sleep for millions of bedfellows watching between their feet, slits his wrist the next morning in the Algonquin's old-fashioned bathroom, the razor in his hand like a toothbrush, wall as anonymous as a urinal, the shower curtain his slack rubberman audience, and then the slash as simple as opening a letter, and the warm blood breaking out like a rose upon the bathtub with its claw and ball feet. And I too. Quite collected at cocktail parties. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm undergoing open-heart surgery. The heart, poor fellow, pounding on his little tin drum with a faint death beat. The heart, that eyeless beetle, running panicked through his maze, never stopping 1 foot after the other, 1 hour after the other, until he gags on an apple and it's all over. And I too again. I built a summer house on Cape Ann, a simple A-frame, and this too was a deception. Nothing haunts a new house. When I moved in with a bathing suit and tea bags, the ocean rumbled like a train backing up, and at each window secrets came in like gas. My mother, that departed soul, sat in my Eames chair and reproached me for losing her keys to the old cottage. Even in the electric kitchen there was a smell of a journey. The ocean was seeping through its frontiers and laying me out on its wet rails. The bed was stale with my childhood, and I could not move to another city where the worthy make a new life. Long ago, there was a strange deception. A wolf dressed in frills, a kind of transvestite, but I get ahead of my story. In the beginning, there was just Little Red Riding Hood, so called because her grandmother made her a red cape and she was never without it. It was her Linus blanket. Besides, it was red. Red as the Swiss flag. Yes, it was red. As red as chicken blood. But more than she loved Riding Hood, she loved her grandmother, who lived far away from the city in the big wood. This one day her mother gave her a basket full of wine and cake to take to her grandmother because she was ill. Wine and cake. Where's the aspirin? The penicillin? Where's the fruit juice? Peter Rabbit got chamomile tea, but wine and cake it was. On her way in the big wood, Red Riding Hood met the wolf. "Good day, Mr. Wolf," she said, thinking him no more dangerous than a streetcar or a panhandler. He asked where she was going, and she obligingly told him there among the roots and trunks, with the mushrooms pulsing inside the moss. He planned now to eat them both. The grandmother, an old carrot, and the child a shy budkin in a red hood. He bade her to look at the bloodroot, the small bunchberry, and the dogtooth, and pick some for her grandmother. And this she did. Meanwhile, he scampered off to grandmother's house and ate her up as quick as a slap. Then he put on her nightdress and cap and snuggled down into bed. A deceptive fellow. Red Riding Hood knocked on the door and entered with her flowers, her cake, her wine. Grandmother looked strange. A dark and hairy disease, it seemed. "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have. Ears, eyes, hands, and then the teeth. The better to eat you with, my dear." So the wolf gobbled Red Riding Hood down like a gumdrop. Now he was fat. He appeared to be in his 9th month, and Red Riding Hood and her grandmother rode like two Jonahs up and down with every breath. One pigeon, one partridge. He was fast asleep, dreaming in his cap and gown, wolfless. Along came a huntsman who heard the loud, contented snores and knew that was no grandmother. He opened the door and said, "So it's you, old sinner." He raised his gun to shoot him when it occurred to him that maybe the wolf had eaten up the old lady, so he took a knife and began cutting open the sleeping wolf, a kind of cesarean section. It was a carnal knife that led Red Riding Hood out like a poppy, quite alive from the kingdom of the belly, and the grandmother too, still waiting for cakes and wine. The wolf, they decided, was too mean to simply be shot, so they filled up his belly with large stones and sewed him up. He was as heavy as a cemetery, and when he woke up and tried to run off, he fell over dead, killed by his own weight. Many a deception ends on such a note. The huntsman and the grandmother and Red Riding Hood sat down by his corpse and had a meal of wine and cake, those two remembering nothing naked and brutal from that little death, that little birth, from their going down and their lifting up. Okay. Next is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. No matter what life you lead, the Virgin is a lovely number. Cheeks as fragile as cigarette paper, arms and legs made of Limoges, lips like vin du rhum, rolling her china blue doll eyes open and shut. Open to say, "Good day, Mama," and shut for the thrust of the unicorn. She is unsoiled. She is as white as a bonefish. Once there was a lovely virgin called Snow White. Say she was 13. Her stepmother, a beauty in her own right, though eaten, of course, by age, would hear of no beauty surpassing her own. Beauty is a simple passion, but oh, my friends, in the end you will dance the fire dance in iron shoes. The stepmother had a mirror to which she referred, something like the weather forecast. A mirror which proclaimed the one beauty of the land. She would ask, looking glass upon the wall, "Who's the fairest of us all?" And the mirror would reply, "You are fairest of us all." Pride pumped in her like poison. Suddenly, one day the mirror replied, "Queen, you are full fair, 'tis true, but Snow White is fairer than you." Until that moment, Snow White had been no more important than a dust mouse under the bed. But now the queen saw brown spots on her hand and 4 whiskers over her lip. So she condemned Snow White to be hacked to death. "Bring me her heart," she said to the hunter, "and I will salt it and eat it." The hunter, however, let his prisoner go and brought a boar's heart back to the castle. The queen chewed it up like a cube steak. "Now I am the fairest," she said, lapping her slim, white fingers. Snow White walked in the wildwood for weeks and weeks. At each turn there were 20 doorways, and in each stood a hungry wolf, his tongue lolling out like a worm. The birds called out lewdly, talking like pink parrots, and the snakes hung down in loops, each a noose for her sweet white neck. On the 7th week she came to the 7th mountain, and there she found the dwarf house. It was as droll as a honeymoon cottage and completely equipped with 7 beds, 7 chairs, 7 forks, and 7 chamber pots. Snow White ate 7 chicken livers and lay down at last to sleep. The dwarves, those little hot dogs, walked 3 times around Snow White, the sleeping virgin. They were wise and waddled like small czars. "Yes, it's a good omen," they said, "and will bring us luck." They stood on tiptoes to watch Snow White wake up. She told them about the mirror and the killer queen, and they asked her to stay and keep house. "Beware of your stepmother," they said. "Soon she will know you are here. While we are away in the mines during the day, you must not open the door." "Looking glass upon the wall," the mirror told, and so the queen dressed herself in rags and went out like a peddler to trap Snow White. She went across 7 mountains. She came to the dwarf house, and Snow White opened the door and bought a bit of lacing. The queen fastened it tightly round her bodice, as tight as an ace bandage, so tight Snow White swooned. She laid on the floor a plucked daisy. When the dwarfs came home, they undid the lace, and she revived miraculously. She was as full of life as soda pop. "Beware of your grandmother," they said. "She will try once more." Snow White, the dumb bunny, opened the door and bit into a poison apple and fell down for the final time. When the dwarves returned, they undid her bodice. They looked for a comb, but it did no good. Though they washed her with wine and rubbed her with butter, it was to no avail. She lay as still as a gold piece. The 7 dwarves could not bring themselves to bury her in the black ground, so they made a glass coffin and set it upon the 7th mountain so that all who passed by could peek in upon her beauty. A prince came one June day and would not budge. He stayed so long his hair turned green, and still he would not leave. The dwarves took pity on him and gave him the glass Snow White, its doll's eyes shut forever, to keep in his far-off castle. As the prince's men carried the coffin, they stumbled and dropped it, and the chunk of apple flew out of her throat, and she woke up miraculously. And thus Snow White became the prince's bride. The wicked queen was invited to the wedding feast, and when she arrived, there were red-hot iron shoes, in the manner of red-hot roller skates, clamped upon her feet. "First your toes will smoke, and then your heels will turn black, and you will fry upward like a frog," she was told. And so she danced till she was dead, a subterranean figure, her tongue flicking in and out like a gas jet. Meanwhile, Snow White held court, rolling her china blue doll eyes open and shut, and sometimes referring to her mirror, as women do. Cinderella. You always read about it. The plumber with 12 children who wins the Irish sweepstakes, from toilets to riches. That story. Or the nursemaid, some luscious sweet from Denmark who captures the oldest son's heart, from diapers to Dior. That story. Or a milkman who serves the wealthy, eggs, cream, butter, yogurt, milk, the white truck like an ambulance, who goes into real estate and makes a pile, from homogenized to martinis at lunch. Or the charwoman who's on the bus when it cracks up and collects enough from the insurance. From mops to bonwit teller. That story. Once, the wife of a rich man was on her deathbed, and she said to her daughter Cinderella, "Be devout, be good. Then I will smile down from heaven in the seam of a cloud." The man took another wife who had 2 daughters, pretty enough, but with hearts like blackjacks. Cinderella was their maid. She slept on the city hearth each night and walked around looking like Al Jolson. Her father brought presents home from town, jewels and gowns for the other women, but the twig of a tree for Cinderella. She planted that twig on her mother's grave, and it grew to a tree where a white dove sat. Whenever she wished for anything, the dove would drop it like an egg upon the ground. The bird's important, my dear, so heed him. Next came the ball, as you all know. It was a marriage market. The prince was looking for a wife. All but Cinderella were preparing and gussying up for the big event. Cinderella begged to go too. Her stepmother threw a dish of lentils into the cinders and said, "Pick them up in an hour and you shall go." The white dove brought all his friends. All the warm wings of the fatherland came and picked up the lentils in a jiffy. "No, Cinderella," said the stepmother, "you have no clothes and cannot dance." That's the way with stepmothers. Cinderella went to the tree at the grave and cried forth like a gospel singer, "Mamma, mamma, my turtle dove, send me to the prince's ball." The bird dropped down a golden dress and delicate little gold slippers. Rather a large package for a simple bird. So she went, which is no surprise. Her stepmother and sisters didn't recognize her without her cinder face, and the prince took her hand on the spot and danced with no other the whole day. As nightfall came, she thought she'd better get home. The prince walked her home, and she disappeared into the pigeon house, and although the prince took an axe and broke it open, she was gone, back to her cinders. These events repeated themselves for 3 days. However, on the 3rd day, the prince covered the palace steps with cobbler's wax, and Cinderella's gold shoes stuck upon it. Now he would find whom the shoe fit, and keep his strange dancing girl for keeps. He went to their house, and the 2 sisters were delighted, because they had lovely feet. The eldest went into a room to try the slipper on, but her big toe got in the way, so she simply sliced it off and put on the slipper. The prince rode away with her until the white dove told him to look at the blood pouring forth. That's the way with amputations. They don't just heal up like a wish. The other sister cut off her heel, but blood told, as blood will. The prince was getting tired. He began to feel like a shoe salesman, but he gave it one last try. This time, Cinderella fit into the shoe like a love letter into its envelope. At the wedding ceremony, the 2 sisters came to curry favor, and the white dove pecked their eyes out. 2 hollow spots were left, like soup spoons. Cinderella and the prince lived, they say, happily ever after, like 2 dolls in a museum case, never bothered by diapers or dust, never arguing over the timing of an egg, never telling the same story twice, never getting a middle-aged spread, their darling smiles pasted on for eternity. Regular Bobbsey twins. That story. Now the last one. Ringing the bells. And this is the way they ring the bells in Bedlam. And this is the bell lady who comes each Tuesday morning to give us a music lesson. And because the attendants make you go, and because we mind by instinct like bees caught in the wrong hive, we are the circle of the crazy ladies who sit in the lounge of the mental house and smile at the smiling women who passes us each a bell and points at my hand that holds my bell E-flat. And this is the gray dress next to me who grumbles as if it were special to be old. And this is the small hunched squirrel girl on the other side of me who picks at the hairs over her lip. All day. And this is how the bells really sound, as untroubled and clean as a workable kitchen. And this is always my bell responding to my hand that responds to the lady who points at me, E-flat. And although we are no better for it, they tell you to go. And you do. I don't think there's really a the end, but that's it for tonight. Thanks for coming. See you next time. Next Poetry Thursday, the P is silent. Good night.